Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Bava Metzia Daf Mem. We begin 11 lines down at the top of the Amud, where the Gemara continues halacha. The next Mishnah, continuing on the theme of this parak Hamafkid, as the word itself opens up, Hamafkid, we discuss some interesting halachas regarding a shomer who's returning something that he was watching, regarding when it's not clear exactly how much he has to return. As we'll see in the Mishnah, why would that be not clear? How much you would have to return? Turn to Daf Chaim. Turn to today's daf throughout the entire world. So discussing today's daf are the Mishnah's opening halacha. Hamafkid pays is chaver. So what happens? A guy deposits something by his friend, but even in peiros, so he's watching the guy's produce. He mixes it with his own produce. Now, b'mistapik b'm, and the guy himself is he's eating from his own cherries, his own berries, whatever. And now he doesn't know how much he used. So now he doesn't know how much to return. Why would that be? Why don't you know how much to return? Let's say he gave you 100 kur. You give back 100 kur. No, it's not true, because this chesroinus, that if things diminish, as we'll explain in the Gemara, it gets deteriorated, mice come and eat, whatever it is, some stuff get used up, it gets dried out, and therefore, I don't know how much to return right now. So that's what the Mishnah is going to explain. Everything goes according to the measurement of how much there is, and that ratio will be calculated to see how much you give back. Now, there is an interesting halacha in the Mishnah, as we'll explain in the Gemara. If there was a huge quantity, then actually, then you don't subtract how much it diminishes. As we'll explain in the Gemara, because it gets actually inflated depending on the time of the year. When it's dry is when he took it, and he returned it when it was already moist. And when it gets moist, it gets a little bit more inflated, and therefore then it's actually the same volume that it was taken, even though it diminishes. Therefore, then you're not going to subtract anything. The what the Gemara discussed in the next Mishnah regarding different types of items, let's say specifically oil, a certain amount that you diminish. We'll explain exactly why that is, regarding the shemarim, the sediments, and regarding other things. Then the Gemara at the end discusses when there's a seller, if he sells shemen mezukah l'chaver, he sells him clear oil. He has to accept upon himself a little bit less, meaning as if there was a lug and a half of shmarim, which generally oil has that amount. I want to explain exactly when that is. Could depend on the time of the year that you paid for it, regarding if you have to calculate certain things, as regarding likech mikabel pakatim, if you have to accept upon yourself, let's say, these little waste matter from the seeds, and if mutlav shmarim, are you allowed to mix in sediments into the refined oil, and that will be calculated into regarding, can you subtract from the person that price difference of the shmarm that you're not leaving into the oil regarding what you're selling to them. So begin the current Daf Mem. We begin in the first Mishnah. Hamafkid Peres Etz Chaver. So someone deposited produce by his friend. Says the Mishnah, Harei Zeh, so the shomer, when he's returning the Peres, whatever it is, wheat, barley, whatever, he's yoitzi loiches shroines. He diminishes from what he's returning. How much, let's say he was holding on to him for 2 years, the guy finally comes back. It's not the same quantity it was when you gave it to me. Things generally get diminished, and therefore you're going to give back you're going to give back the quantity less. No. Oh, so no, but yeah, so exactly. So the Gemara is going to explain, we're talking about that he mixed it with his own produce. If it's in the corner, so yeah, just give it back as it is. But the thing is they get diminished. It's not going to be the same amount, as we explain why. So since he had to mix with his own, and he has been using his own stuff, there's a certain amount that he's going to give him less than it was. And the Mishnah explains now what exactly those differentials are. So let's say lechitim ula oires. So let's say he was watching from wheat, or we generally translate oires as rice. Rashi here says it's a machlekes rishonim as millet. So be that as it may, so that's tisha chatzi kavan lekur. So that's for he deducts 9 half a kavan for a kur, which is 2.5% basically from the wheat. That's how much you're going to diminish from what you're returning. For barley, and again, generally deichen, we generally translate that as millet, but here Rashi says it's petal, which is similar to iris. Okay, something similar to millet is tisha kavan lekur. That's 9 kav for a kur. In other words, that's double the amount. They obviously get diminished more than it is by the case of wheat. Then lukusmin for spelt, lazera pishton, and flaxseed are shalosh saw in the kur. For every kur is 3 saw, so that's a large amount. These things get diminished faster and there's going to be a larger amount that you're going to diminish when you're returning, which the Mishnah says, what's important to qualify, hakol lefi hamida, everything is according to the measurement, meaning you'll do this for every single core. So if you gave 3 core, so again, that's how much the ratio will be, and hakol lefi hazman, everything is also according to the amount of time that it was by you, meaning for every single year, that's how much you're going to subtract. So again, that's the ratio per time, per quantity, that says the Tanna Kama you're going to subtract. However, Amr Rabbi Shloimy he disagrees. He says, he's disagreeing, says Rashi, on hakol lefi hamida, that you're telling me for every single core, that's how much you're going to subtract. It's not that that's the amount you're going to subtract per year. Per core per year, that's how much you're going to subtract. He disagrees on that. He says, what do the mice care how much quantity there is? They always eat, whether there's a lot, whether there's a little, it's always going to eat the same amount. Rather, we're only to subtract how much it diminishes. So, according to Rabbi Shloimy, so per year, it's going to be the 9 half a carbon, the 9 carb, the 3 saw, whatever it is, because it's the same mice that hang around your house. They're not going to be eating more, double, triple, quadruple, whatever amount of quantity you have, it's always going to be the same amount. Which, so Taisus brings very interesting on Divrei Masach Ma'achbes. He says, so what's the pshat in the Rabbanan? The Tanna Kama, how is it possible that depending on the core, that's how much more they're going to eat? Mice eat a certain amount, we're saying, right? And you're saying that it's this amount per core. Why don't they eat the whole core? Because that's how much they eat. So why Taka do the Rabbanan hold that for every core it's going to be that amount? So the Taisus brings from the Yerushalmi that Hanech Bari Rishoin, you didn't have to convince any housewife, but these mice, they're wicked. Why are they wicked? Because when they see that there's amount of food that they can't eat themselves, there's more quantity, Karyan Lechavreihan, the Achliman, they call their friends to eat with them. And so therefore, that's why it is going to be per core, because then they call in the troops. And they say, there's a huge quantity over here in this house. And so that's why they hold. Says Taisus, we're going to see shortly that they say a different reason. That's only according to the words of Rabbi Yechanan. But the Tanna Kama himself holds that it's going to be a per core. It does depend hakol lefi hamida, not like Rabbi Shloimy. Now the third opinion brings the Mishnah, which we'll explain the Gemara exactly what does this mean. Rabbi Yehuda says, Im hoisa mida meruba, if it was a large quantity, which is that he deposited by the shomer a lot, and the Gemara is going to explain that refers to 10 kur, then any much then you don't return it to him any less than what he gave it to you. Why? What does that mean? Because in the time of the harvest, when the owner deposited the wheat by the shomer, it was dry. When he returns it to him in the winter months, then it's inflated. It's more moist. So whatever the mice ate will not diminish so much for every core, because the mice don't eat so much from 10 core. So with the inflation of the actual grain will supplement whatever was missing for the 2 or 3 core that the mice ate, because it gets inflated. So you'll just give back exactly as it was, because it's going to be the same volume is going to be as it was, whatever they ate up, because it gets inflated. Such a large amount, its inflation is going to be whatever the amount that the mice ate. So it says Rabbi Yehuda, you'll just give it back as it is. You're not going to diminish anything. Now, the Gemara asks more technical questions. Oirez, you told me on rice that the halacha is that we're going to diminish 9 half a kavim. Says the Gemara, tuvachas. It's not true. Rice actually diminishes more than that. So he says, but we're talking about peeled rice. Generally, the husks, they're the things that really get lost and get diminished, and they're obviously that's going to remove from the volume. But we're talking about peel husk rice already. So therefore, there's not that much for it to lose. That's why it's only 9 half a kavim. Now, l'kus min l'zera pishtan, we said for the spelt and the flaxseed is gimel sa in likur. It's for every core is 3 sa. So Amr Yechanan, he qualifies this. He says zera pishtan, the flaxseed is begivoilan with the husks that Shana that we're learning that it diminishes so much, and the reason is because the husks they dry up and they fall off, and the wind blows it away. But flaxseed that's been already husked, it does not diminish so much, and therefore it would be a lower ratio of what you would diminish. In the Bryce, Lakusman for speltals, there are pishtan and for flaxseed, begevoilin, if they're in their husks, and and for rice that's not been peeled, like we said, that's a greater amount that will diminish. That will be shleisha on the core, will be 3 saw for kurtes. Discuss this why didn't we put the case together, because the other part of it. But akapanim, that explains the specific measurements of these cases. How much are we saying that? Yeah, it's not gonna be the same quantity. You're going to be giving back less than what it was deposited by you. Now the Mishnah said, everything goes according to the measurement, said the Tanakh and this man. However long as the Tan, as we learned in the Brisa that explains the Mishnah, that came l'chol kur v'kur, v'chein l'chol shana v'shana, as we would explain this idea, it means that for every single kur is that amount, according to the Tanakh, like we said, because they invite their fellow mice friends over, and it's also for every single year, because that's for the year, and then the annual mice, eat a certain amount. Therefore, that's how we're going to qualify. Now, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg disagreed. He says no. It's per year it's always going to be the same amount. 1 core, 2 core, 3 core, 4. It doesn't make a difference. The mice only eat a certain amount, and therefore it's not going to double or triple, quadruple, whatever according to the core that you have. Starting in the Brisa, and Tosai already explained that although the Chacham, the Tanakh is responding and disagreeing to Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, their real reason is not what they're about to say right now. Their real reason is, like we said, is because of the Yesham, because they call their fellow mice. But they're saying, according to you, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, even you should hold that it should be more. Why? Because Amalei Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, they said to Rabbi Shloimy, Harba Oivdus Mehen. A lot of it gets lost. Har mispazman, a lot of it gets scattered. In other words, the more there is, the more does get lost. Not only mice that cause it to get lost. There's also other besides for infestation. Chassan is also from grain that becomes spoiled and blown away, and this chassan does depend on the amount of produce. So there is going to be more loss according to the core, not just according to the year. Now, Tanya Lina Braisa explained the halacha of the Mishnah that we said that when you give back the produce, you're going to be yoitzi lechesroinus, you're going to diminish the amount you're giving back. It's not the same volume. Says the Braisa, when do we say this? And this just explains the halacha itself, which was we're trying to understand why you're giving back less. Just give back what it is. She'idavon impeidoisa. Talking about what the guy is. He has the same stuff, and the guy says, "Look, could you watch it? You're watching your own stuff. Watch it for me too." But he mixed it with his own produce, and therefore now he doesn't know. He was using it all along. He doesn't know how much is yours, how much is mine. So I know I have to give back a certain amount. I'm going to give you less volume because we assume infestation. We assume that some of it the wind blew away. Now, but if he designated a corner for him to put his stuff, then you're right. Amalei just tells him, hey, whatever's yours, take it. Whatever. How much infestation? How much? It's badly. Now it says Gemara, but if he mixed it with his own produce, my haba, who cares? Let's see how much he had and how much he had, and then you'll know how much to give back. It says Gemara, something with the guy himself, the shomer was using, he was eating from his own fruits. It says Gemara, okay, but let's see how much he was using. You'll know how much is remaining. It belongs to that other person. It says Gemara, he doesn't know how much he was using to see how much is missing, and to calculate accordingly how much is from his friends. He doesn't know how much he used. He just knows that the guy gave him 10 core. Okay, now how much do I give back? I don't give back exactly 10 core because infestation, and we're going to all these things, and that's what we're discussing in our Mishnah. How much less do you give back than what the guy gave you? Now, the last opinion was Rabbi Yehuda Omer. He said, he says, if it was a mida meruba, then the halacha is you're not going to subtract anything because it's moisiros. So it says, what's a large quantity that you're not going to give back any less because it's so large? So and this is a set of kurim. When it's 10 kur, you'll give back 10 kur. How much a large quantity? A 10 kur. So the Gemara wants to explain what's the understanding of this halacha. What do you mean 10 kur? You don't have mice eating, you don't have the wind blowing. What do you mean? The bigger I thought, the more gets lost, the more gets scattered. So Tani Kamed Rab Nachman. So there was someone who taught Brises, has sat over in front of Rab Nachman to explain this halacha. But imagine when do we say this? When do we say that you give back less? Is that the guy had measured it out to the shomer from the granary, and he gave it back to him from the granary. But let's say he measured him from the granary. But the Shema gave back from his own house. Then he's not going to give back anything less. Because the measurements by the Goyrin were larger than the ones of the homes. So if the guy's giving back the measurements of Kur from your home measurements, the home measurements are smaller. So because the ones from the Goyrin are larger, so now you're not going to give back any less because they're actually large, they're actually smaller measurements. So yes, it was diminished. That's how the Gemara originally understands it. So you'll give back 10 kur because they're smaller anyways, the measurements. So therefore it's going to equal the amount that was lost. So Amalei, so he says, what, we think we're talking about with fools over here? The other Bekaila Rabba, that when they give it to the Shomer, they give it a large measurement. The Shakla Bekaila Zuta, they take it back with a smaller measurement. Well, how would that even be understandable that you'd give it back with a smaller measurement? So on that he says, no, you're reading it wrong. Dilma, maybe it doesn't mean from the Goyrin. It means b'mois haGoyrin kamret. We mean to say at the time of the granary, which is close to the time when it's dry, because over the summer, that's why Sukkot is the end of the Chag Asif. You would poke the Chag Katzu with Shavuos, and that's where they would harvest it. And then all throughout the summer, it would lay outside to dry up, and then you would bring it in Chag Asif on Sukkot. So we're talking about the b'mois haGoyrin. And that's what the Brisa means, like this. When do we say this halacha that you're going to diminish, which is the whole theme we're discussing here in today's daf? What happened was is that he measured out to him, to the shomer, in the summer months, and he gave it back to him in the summer months. So then, okay, there's going to be a discrepancy. You're going to see the mice, and it's the same type of quality to see the difference in the quantity of a module but let's say he measured out to the shomer in the summer. He gave it back from the Shem, he gave it back in the winter months. Oh, what happens is the grain gets a little bit inflated from the moisture of the rain and the cold. In summer, it constricts. In the winter, it gets a little bit more inflated. Oh, so then that's Rabbi Yehuda's halacha. You're not going to subtract anything. Because whatever it was missing from the mice or that inflation is going to make it back the same volume of what it was when it was given. So you don't subtract anything because it's the same amount. So then Amalei Pabal Abaye says, Im Kain, he says, if that's true, like what you're saying, that the produce inflates in the winter months, so lifka kada, when they fill up a jug of wheat or barley in the summer months, and then they close the lid and they fill it up to the top, so in the winter it should burst because of the inflation of the grain. You tell me they get bigger, so it should burst, like when you put that soda can in the freezer, you come back and you see that it broke open. So why doesn't that happen? So either says the Gemara, it's not true. Have uvdu pokakada. There was a story and actually a jug did burst because you're right, they do inflate. Or you say if you want to say mishum itzitza, because of the pressing, meaning since the grain is in a very narrow place that's pressed together, they don't get to inflate because it's pushed together and it's constricted. But if not, if they're in an open area, then they do inflate, and therefore then that's why, according to the ratio of 10 kur, however much that inflation is, Rabbi Yehuda says that will cover for whatever the mice eat from the 2 or 3 kur, therefore you're going to give back exactly the volume that you got. That ends that Mishnah. Now we continue halacha the next Mishnah, which continues on this theme regarding the how much you subtract regarding when you give back a food item that you were shomer for. Says the Mishnah, shtus leyayin. Now this is for a very different reason. This is not because of mice or infestation or because of, as we said it regarding grain items from the previous Mishnah, but it's for a different reason. If someone deposited by someone wine, now he mixed it with his own wine. He knows how much the guy gave him, of a volume of wine. But the thing is that the jugs absorb 1/6 of the wine. The barrels take up some of the wine. So when you return the wine to him, you're going to subtract 1/6 that you give him back because it's in the barrel. Rabbi Shloimy says, no, chaimish. Actually, even more. You subtract not just 1/6, but actually 1/5 of the wine. Now, continuing to the next item, when the guy gave you 100 lug of oil to wash, you subtract 3 lugin when you give it back to him. Why? Because there's lugin mechza shemachim. there's a lug and a half of sediments, which has to be counted that you're not giving him back because you're giving back, you're pouring back out, all the sediments on the bottom. That's his sediments too. So you have to subtract the lug and a half of shemarim and lug mechzabela. There's a lug and a half, or it also gets absorbed in the jug, which again, that's also from his, and therefore, when you give him back the actual oil, you're going to subtract that lug and a half from that. Now, if it was refined oil, if he gave you refined oil to watch, you're not going to subtract sediments because there was no sediments. So it'll just be a lug and a half that gets absorbed into the walls of the jug. Now, if it was old jugs in Yitzle, then you don't subtract what gets absorbed because nothing gets absorbed because it already was absorbed beforehand with whatever was inside of it before the jug was used. Rabbi Shloimy, he says, just like we're saying this halacha by Parak HaMafkid by a shomer, so too they said this af hamoicher shemen mezukah lechaveri. If someone sells refined oil to his friend kol yimei sashana throughout the year, and he gives it to him from his barrels when he's constantly using it and it's refined, harei zeh, the buyer is makabel love, accepts upon himself to diminish loigu mechza shmachim lameya. For every 100 lug, he subtracts a lug and a half of sediments that should be there. He's subtracting that amount that he's getting the refined oil from the price that's being sold to him. Now, the Gemara actually says, regarding this machlekes, v'loi pelegi, the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda, they don't disagree, meaning going back to the opening halacha of our Mishnah, we spoke about wine. Is wine is going to be a sixth, or is it going to be a fifth? Says the Gemara, they don't disagree. Marki asre, marki asre. Each person is going according to how it was, the actual product in their places, as the Gemara explains. But Asri Damar, where the Tanna Kama lived, chafu bikira, they would smear the barrels from within with wax, the way Rashi says we do with tar, and therefore v'lomayitz tvei. It doesn't absorb so much. It's a less. We know with materials, with kashrus, Pesach coming up with kashring, certain things they absorb and certain things don't, certain things more, certain things less. So in where the Tanna Kama lived, it only absorbed up to a sixth. But the Asri Damar, where Rabbi Yehuda lived, chafa b'kufra. So they smeared it with pitch and umayitz tvei, and that sucks up more. So therefore, that's why it was a fifth. But they don't disagree. It depends on the material that's being used. Or if you want, you could say mishum gargishta. Actually, the ground that they make the barrels from, it also depends. Where Rabbi Yehuda lived, maitza tvei. The ground there where you made the kiln, you heat it up in the kiln and you made a barrel out of it, it absorbed more than where the Tanna Kama lived. But where the Tanna Kama lived, it didn't suck so much. So again, it depends on where they lived regarding if whether the material of the barrel or whether what they smeared the barrel with. But that's why they don't really disagree. It depends on just where they lived. Now the Gemara brings a story which is independent. It's not really going on the Mishnah, that says the following halacha: Ba'asr Rabbi Yehuda, where Rabbi Yehuda lived, Romu arboim v'tamni kuzi. Kuzi is a small measurement where he lived, but 48 kuzi was bedana, meaning 48 kuzi would fill up a barrel that they had where he lived. Okay. Now, azal dana b'shita zuzi, a barrel, and you have to just keep cheshbon there just for the story. A barrel, if you costed 6 zuzi if it were sold in one shot, meaning at the harvest season, if you bought a barrel, it costed you 6 zuzi. Okay, so Parash Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda became a retailer, and he would sell shita 6 kuzi bezuzah. So just hard cup if you're a businessman, exactly what he was doing. Again, there was 48 kuzi in the barrel. A barrel costed 6 zuzi. This is good for like a 6th grade math teacher to use with his class. And Rabbi Yehuda, he went and he would sell 6 kuzi for a zuz. So it's a getintum and beis. So dal plus and vashita. So you subtract 36 kuzi Beshita, with the 6 zuzi that he bought, meaning if you want to see if he's making money, remember there's 48 kuzi, and he spent 6 zuzi on that. If he's selling each 6 kuzi for a zuz, so 6 times 6 is 36. So he has now, if you subtract 36 from the 48, which he made back all the money that he invested in this barrel, Pashule Tresa, he's left with 12 kuzi profit from what he bought. Now, it's not yet. The al tamanya, you have to subtract 8, which is shtusi, which is a 6th of the 48, because, and this is why we're bringing the story, we said in our Mishnah that the kankan, the jug, absorbs a 6th of the wine. That's why we said when you're a shomer, you give back a 6th less of the wine because it gets absorbed in the barrel itself. So now, if you subtract from the 12, you subtract 8, pashalahu. So now, for his profit margin, he was left with arba, with 4 kuzi that he made off selling. And now that's like any guy who does construction, who does real estate. He buys a piece of land, he makes 12 homes. He's not making any money. He makes money. The last home left, he finally pays back all the loans he took from the bank. Is that one last house? That's where he's going to make his money. Here he's left with 4 kuzi. That's profit. That's the profit margin that he made. And again, that's why I bring it in, because related to this teaching that you have to subtract also a 6. A lot of people, when they do business, they don't realize there's some losses over there that you didn't count for. You think, oh, I'm making all this. No, you have to subtract 6 from the wine that's getting absorbed in the jug itself and in part of the procedures. Now, that's Rabbi Yehuda. Yeah, this is Rav Yehuda. Yeah. So for him, yeah, if it would have been a 5th, it would have been even worse for him. So make sure you paskin like the one that you make more on, so that you lose less on. Like the famous story with the who had it was a treifa, and Chaznish, whoever was told him to go to Eretz Yisrael because the Beis Yosef was the Bava Metzia Daf Yisrael, and there you'll live and here. So paskin like the one that you'll make. The Gemara says, but Shmuel, the Gemara is bothered with this because Shmuel says hamistaker. If someone if his parnasa is with things that people depend on, al yistaker yoisal shtus, you shouldn't charge more than a 6th because people need it, and you shouldn't charge so much. But as Rashi infers, a 6th you're allowed to make. So the Gemara is bothered. It's very Jewish mentality. Why wouldn't Rabbi Yehuda then make up until a shtus? Meaning, he's only making half of that amount. He's walking away with 4. A 6th would have been 8 from the 48. So why is he walking away with half of what he could make? As Taisus explains that Mistama Rabbi Yehuda would be able to find someone that would give him more. So Taisus' words were, well, why wouldn't he make up until the amount that you can make? Why is he walking away with half? It's, a yid can make more money. There's no reason why not to. And the Gemara is asking as a kasha, why is he making less? Says the Gemara, no, it's not true. Don't worry, he's making money. He has the jug and the sediments, which he bought all that with the 6 zuz. You're not keeping track of the story, you were just discussing the wine, but there's also the sediments. He's going to make money on that, and the compost, on the whatever, and he's going to make money on the barrel. So therefore, that'll cover that amount. He'll make up until a 6th. Says, wait, if that's the case, nafish leitfeimishtos. For some reason, the Gemara understood that there's sediments and the barrel, that's going to make you more than the 6th, and we're not allowed to make it. Says, no, you have to consider the other expenses too. Ikar tirche, there's this effort where he could charge like any guy who owns a company. He takes a salary too, besides the company making money and whatever, and the shares, and he charges for his effort. And v'demei barzan yasa, there's another expense you didn't consider. He has to give money to the stores to sell it, and he also has to pay for marketing, that making announcements and Pachkaville and all the different things, and put on posters, this and that. where that would be if you had the girsa not bars niyasa, but would be kars niyasa, which is terminology of a kraza, like an announcement. Or another pshat, which is according to our girsa, if it's bars niyasa, Rashi says there's a profession that, it's so interesting how we see it, and you get your niche, you get your market, that there was a profession that he makes the hole of the spigot in the barrel of earthenware. You got to pay him. He's the guy that you got to come to. He's like, you got to make that perfect hole, put in the spigot. That's the guy. So you have to pay him also. People don't chab when you're doing business. You have to consider there's all these different expenses. So therefore, that takes away. So he made his 6. Don't worry, he didn't under or overcharge. That's the exact story itself. Again, but we brought it in because of the halacha of understanding that as a 1/6 of your wine that's going to get absorbed in the barrel itself. Now we said in the Mishnah, now if it's refined oil, then we said you're not going to take away the sediments because it was refined oil that he gave you. And we said that if it's an old jug, then you're not going to take away either for the blias of what's absorbed, because the old jugs don't absorb anymore. They're already full with absorptions, and therefore you don't subtract even for the absorption. Says the Gemara, but says the Gemara, it's not possible that it's not absorbing something. We know blias things are always being absorbed. So Rav Nachman says no, but mezufafin shanu. We're talking about where that they actually had been tarred, and since they're old and it already has absorbed blias, so it's not going to absorb anymore. Tais actually asks a question. He says, in and he says, what do you mean? If it's actually tarred, actually absorbs even more. That's what we said in Amad Aleph. So I thought the tar absorbs more. So that's only by when it's new. When it's old, it already absorbed. It doesn't absorb anymore. Or you could say it was by wine. Here we're talking about oil. Oil doesn't absorb once it's old and it's hard. It depends on the interpretation, but that it's not going to absorb anymore. Abayam, he says no. And you could even say if it's not tarred, keep the ton. Once it's loaded up, it's loaded up. It's not going to absorb anymore because it's already full of absorptions, and therefore, once it's old, therefore that's why we're saying that it's not going to be belay. You wouldn't subtract even for the belias. Now, the Mishnah said, Rabbi Shloimy, he says that this halacha that we're discussing regarding the blias and regarding the shemarim is not just by a shemer, it's also also someone who sells refined oil to his friend all year round. So hey, you realize I'm selling you refined oil. I'm losing over here, says the meicher, the sediments over here. I got to charge you more for the fact that you're getting refined oil. How raise him a couple of lug for every 100 lug, you got to take off, you got to consider a loss of a lug and a half of sediments. Now, that's Rabbi Yehuda. The inference is obviously the Chum disagree with that. So the Gemara says, I'm a baya. So we have machlekes actually how to interpret this machlekes in the Mishnah. Kishatim tzaloimar, when you're going to analyze, you're going to understand the essence of what they're saying. You come out like this: the Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, when someone sells to his friend oil unspecifically at a time when it's refined, which is because what happens is, as anyone knows, that things sink to the bottom, so the sediments are on the bottom. So that Rabbi Yehuda would hold, the truth is mutal arav. You're allowed to mix it up, the shemarim that are submerged, to make them get mixed up again, so that the sediments come out with the oil when you're measuring out, to mix it and make sure it goes, when you're selling it out. Right, imagine a guy in the store, in the shuk, in the Machne Yehuda shuk, and the guy's selling, shemen, and it's got on the bottom of the sediment. He doesn't want to be left with that sediment himself. According to Yehuda, he's allowed to mix it up and then pour it out for you, even though it is refined, to make sure that you get some of that sediments too. That's according to Rabbi Yehuda. And the Gemara is explaining exactly what he's saying. But according to the Chachamim, no, asal av shemar. You're not allowed to mix in the sediments when it's presumed that he's buying from him refined oil and he's ruining it. You can't do that. So the Gemara explains. According to Rabbi Yehuda, mutal av shemar, you're allowed to mix up sediments behind the time of the makabel, and that's the reason Abai is explaining. It must be this Rabbi Yehuda hold, and that's why he's saying in the Mishnah that the buyer accepts upon himself a lug and a half of sediment when he doesn't mix it up, and he gives it to him refined, because the Amalei, the seller, tells him, look, buddy, if I want to mix it up for you, Milo Arbalach, you don't think I can mix it up for you? I can mix in the sediments. So Hashna Mikabel, now that I'm giving you good refined oil, but accept upon yourself the lug and a half, because I could have. That's what Abai is saying is dach muchach from Yehuda. But says him, why? Why can't he tell him, here aftali? That's not true. You can't charge me for the lugin have you not given me a sediment. If you would have mixed it into me, have misdabenly. When I would sell it in my store, I would be able to sell the sediments with my oil. Now, hashtamai abadle, what can I do with it now? L'chodelim misdabenly. I can't sell just the. If you would sell me the sediments with the oil, when I would resell it, I would also be able to. But now that you didn't mix it in, what you're going to give me sediments? What can I do with sediments? No one wants sediment. What can I do with it now? Says he, well, no, but balabayis is kinam. We're talking about where the buyer is a regular consumer. He's taking it to eat in his house. The nichale betzila. He's not reselling it. He has no need for the sediments. He would be busy all day trying to make sure it doesn't come out that little bit at the end. Make sure that you leave it down the bottom. So I'm selling it to refine. Accept upon yourself the leg and a half of the shmachim. But says the Gemara, why? Why can't he tell him, obviously, but the fact that you didn't mix it up for me, achuli achlasli, you're Michael, you're pardoning me. That's your own thing. Why should you charge me for that? Says the Gemara, no, this is Rabbi Huda, who goes to Tameh, he goes according to his reasoning elsewhere, the less the mechila. He doesn't hold of the halachic principle that when the guy is doing something, we're inferring that he pardoned. Where do we find this? It's Mishnah Bava Basa. Mishnah says, Machar lo yasatzemed. If someone sells to someone else the yoke, which is put on a pair of oxen, and they wear it when they, let's say, are plowing, loy machar lo yasabakar. It doesn't mean that he sold them the cattle. Machar lo yasabakar, if he sells them the cattle, loy machar lo yasatzemed. Says the Tanna Kama, it doesn't mean he sells them the yoke. Whatever you sold, you sold. That's what the Tanna Kama says. Now, Yehuda says, no, hadam and maydin. He says, not necessarily. It could be, if you sell one, the other one will be sold with it, because the money lets us know. Ketza, what does that mean? So Amalei, let's say he tells him, sell me your yoke for 200 zuz. We know that the tzemed itself is not sold by Masayim zuz. It doesn't cost that much. It must be, he means to say that he's selling the tzemed with the bakar that he's selling it to him. So the money, the price obviously tells us that he's selling the animals with it too. They say no, ain't adam and raya. No, the amount that he's charging is not a proof. Meaning, even though it's not really worth that much, it could be that he's being meichel to him the excess money that he's charging him. Therefore, the lekeach will suffer that loss because he's being meichel, charge me whatever. But as Rashi explains, Rabbi Yehuda does not hold that we're presuming mechila, only if he specifies. So again, therefore we see Rabbi Yehuda does not hold of mechila, presumed mechila, and therefore that explains the halacha that he's saying over here, that we're not presuming that he didn't give him the shmachim that he was Michael. No, not Michael. You have to accept it upon yourself because I could have mixed it. Therefore, I'm going to subtract from what I'm giving you a leg and a half of shmachim. That's according to Rabbi Yehuda. The Chacham, according to the Chamim, says this all in Abaya. He says no, they hold asla of shmar. You're not allowed to mix in the sediments. So that's why the buyer doesn't have to accept that lesser amount, like a subtraction of that amount, because Amalei, he could tell him, if you would want to mix in to my oil, would it be permitted for you? No, you're not allowed to. So I don't have to accept upon myself that lesser amount because you're not allowed to mix in anyway. That's how Abai explains. Now comes the next Amira, and he says, Punkt faket. Amira Pabal Abaya. So Rapab is saying to Abai, who just said this interpretation, Adirabba. To the contrary, Ipcha Mistabra, the classic Talmudic words, says the logic is the opposite of what you just said. Why? So I'll explain to you. According to the words Chachamim, to the contrary, they hold mutula arab shmachim. You're allowed to mix in the sediments. And v'hainu taima doloi makabel. So wait a second. So why would the Chacham hold, because this is exactly the inverse of what Abai just told us, why would they hold that the buyer doesn't have to accept that lesser amount, like the subtraction of the quantity? But what I mean, the guy could mix it in if he wants to. No, because the Amalei, he could tell him, the fact that you didn't mix in, you could have. You're Michael to me. That's what I'm hold that you cannot subtract, because why didn't you do it? You could have done it. So therefore, faket, that's why I don't have to take the lesser amount. With the Rabbi Yehuda, he holds asal arab shmar. You're not allowed to mix in sediments. Oh, I'm not allowed to. It's not like it's a mechila. I'm not allowed to mix it in. Behind time in the Kabbalah, that's why the buyer has to accept that loss. Because Amalei, the seller could tell him, look, if I would want to mix in the sediments, I wouldn't be permitted, based on law, to mix it in for you. and now you're not going to accept the loss of the sediment, so how am I going to make money? The whole profit margin is in the shemachim. And as the Gemara explains, very interesting terminology, Zovan v'zabein, buying and selling, tigra ikri, that's called a merchant, meaning it's a mashal you say to a fool, that a guy buys and then he goes and he sells without making any money. So the guy buys huge properties, a $50 million property, wow, huge guy, and then he sells it for the same amount that he bought it for. So you're not a merchant, you're a fool. You're not making any money. He says, what do you want from me? The whole profit margin is in that sediment. If I can't give it to you, at least you have to subtract that amount from what you're getting. And therefore, says Rav Papa, the exact opposite of Abaya, they hold opposite regarding if you're allowed to mix it, to understand why when you're selling it, if the guy has to accept that you're not, that it's not part of it or not. Now, right, we're talking about the shmachim, but he's well, I mean, it depends. When you're selling him that, I don't know if it's possible to count when you're a shomer, so bli is over time, per the year, it gets absorbed in the jug. When you're selling someone something, I don't know if you're selling him blias. You're not selling him, I mean, the oil itself, the product itself has shmachim. So you can talk about the subtraction. I don't know if it would be possible to mention blias. What does your blias have to do with what he's buying from you? That's what I'm saying. I think that's why it's not probably relevant when it comes to mechira. But there is one other item that we didn't mention yet, which Tana, that's what the Brisa teaches right now. Whether we're talking about a guy who's buying or whether we're talking about a case of a shomer, but they're the same for the next item of lepekatim, because we were just talking about if there's a difference or not, the machlokes is reading the chachamim, but regarding pekatim, they have the same halacha. Pekatim, says Rashi, is the waste matter of the seed that floats on the surface of the oil. For that, they're the same. Now, it says Gemara, what does that mean? What does it mean that for pekatim they're the same? So the Gemara tries to explore this. Ilim, if you think it means to say, just like the buyer does not have to accept himself this waste matter of the leftover pits that floating in the oil, then mafkid that means the owner, when he's getting it back from the shomer, doesn't have to accept that from the shomer. Why? Why doesn't the shomer just tell him? What did I do with it? What does that mean? It's yours. Take it back as it is because it floated to the top. What do you want from me? So it says the Gemara, no, you must say, just like the owner of the item, when the shomer is giving it back to him, of course he has to take it back with whatever's floating on the top from the seeds. The buyer has to also, let's say he sells them stam shemen, he has to accept from him oil with these leftover pits that are floating in the oil. Says the Gemara, really? You mean does the buyer really have to accept these pekadim when he's buying the oil? But we're talking in the Brisa, Yudami says, Loi Amr Shemen Acher. We didn't say this halacha of the loss of the murky oil, only for the meicher has to accept the loss of the unclean oil, because because the buyer accepts upon himself to diminish from the 100 lug, loy gomechza, a lug and a half, because of the shemachim, because of the sediments. So therefore, he has to give him refined oil, beloy pekatim, without these floating waste matter from the seeds. So this seems to contradict what we said, if the buyer has to accept the pekatim or not. So the Gemara ends by saying it depends what the case is. Loikash, it's not difficult. The first teaching was the Yovli Zuzi b'Tishrei. The guy paid for it in Tishrei, which is in the, like we said, that's the time of the Geirin, because Shokal Minei ben Nisan. But he only took it from him in Nisan, in the season that we're in right now, Chag HaGeula, Kimida, in the same measurement, for the same price, the Tishrei. Now, Tishrei, it's cheaper. Now, in Tishrei time, generally, the oil is going to be murky then, because it wasn't refined yet. This is right out of the season, right? Organic stuff, you buy these stuff, you're getting it like, for all these stuff inside of it. And therefore, he accepted the pekatim because he's paying the cheaper price when it was unrefined. Now, he only comes to the store 6 months later. When it is refined, you're not getting, you have to accept yourself the pekatim. This last teaching that we quote from Yehuda was the Yovli Zuzi ben Nisan. He paid in Nisan time, which is when you're expecting refined oil, because Shokum ben Nisan, and he's taking Nisan, Kimidin in Nisan, like the measure of Nisan, which is a higher price, which generally all the oil that time is already refined. When someone buys unspecifically and the seller is selling unspecifically, you're only allowed to sell refined, so it's not a stira. It depends when it is. If you bought it at a cheaper time, then it's unrefined, and then you'll have to accept that even though you're coming in Nisan time, and if you're not getting, you have to accept that loss, versus if you pay in Nisan, you get a Nisan, then you'll get that which is the more expensive price without the bekadim inside. Thank you to any time for those things.